I think that these are two quick ones, and they're fairly easy to summarize. The logical fallacy of generalization from fictional evidence is one of my favorites because when phrased that way, it tells you the exact point of it.
Yeah.
And I once in a while bring this up, and I phrase it exactly like this way. If someone is mentioning like their dislike of smart house things, because apparently there was a movie in the 90s or early 2000s called Smart House.
Okay.
Or Smart Home or whatever, and obviously it
Does it
turns
like
on
kill
them.
them? Yeah.
I think it was a Disney or like a younger population movie.
Okay.
So at the very least, it turns on and makes their lives annoying. I forget what it does because I never saw the movie, but they were like, no, I don't want all the the smart lights and the electronic assistants that if I say its name, it'll start talking to us.
Yeah.
I don't want any of that stuff because I saw this movie Smart House, and I'm like, we should be careful about generalizing from fictional evidence, right? Because when you say that, it's like, you realize you're making your case from something that someone just made up.
Yes.
Like, it couldn't be more facetious way to base any belief on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh no, we should really be careful not to I don't know, go out during a full moon because of werewolves or something, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's exactly that level of reinforcement there. You need a separate argument for why this makes any sense.
Yes, and yeah, it's wonderful. He says some get it, some people get it and right away and laugh, and that's the level we're talking on right now. But he also goes deeper into that about why this is something to worry about, even if you do realize that it's fictional evidence and shouldn't be used in any sort of real evidence. So I'm going to go into a little bit more on that part because that's the more interesting part, I think.
Totally.
Well, they're both interesting, but more applicable to our audience.
One's easy and doesn't need anything worth talking about. And the other one is deeper.
Yes. As he says, there are subtler ways to go wrong. I'm going to... Okay, so... the first of all, he makes the point that requirements of storytelling are not the same as requirements of forecasting. Obviously, stories don't use probability distributions, and makes a really cool example about, the hero walked into this room and looked left and then right, or possibly right and then left, and then was holding one of these various weapons and gives percentage possibilities for each one. And then his loyal sidekick joined in afterwards, and some scholars say that it was this sidekick and he died soon after, but other scholars say that it was this sidekick and lasted through the rest of the adventure, and that's just not a very good story.
Unless it's worth the candle.
But that is the sort of thing that you would say if you were actually trying to make a prediction, right? You give various probability distributions rather than just this is exactly what happens. But he says, but that's not even the real problem. On problems with large answer spaces, the greatest difficulty is not verifying the correct answer, but simply locating it in answer space to begin with. If someone starts out by asking whether or not AIs are going to put us in capsules like in the Matrix, they're jumping to a 100-bit proposition without a corresponding 98 bits of evidence to locate it in the answer space as a possibility worthy of explicit consideration.
Imagine for a second someone dedicating a great deal of their time towards preventing that specific outcome. It almost sounds insane, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they want to go Timothy McVeigh style and blow up computer buildings. I don't know exactly what he did, but whatever. If they want to go Sarah Connor and start blowing up computer science buildings, let's generalize from that fictional evidence.
Yeah.
Then sure, then you're solving a wider problem from whatever you think you're doing. But if all you're trying to do is keep the Matrix robots from putting you in pods to harvest your BTUs, that seems like a really weirdly specific goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he points out that normally if you were trying to locate something worthy of consideration, you'd do things like weighing what you know and don't know, what you can and can't predict, trying to avoid biases and widen confidence intervals, pondering which questions are the important ones, trying to adjust for black swans, but jumping simply to Matrix yes or no skips over all of those steps.
Matrix yes or no.
Yeah.
I mean, yes or no skips over all the steps unless you just answered no, right? I mean, I guess, but jumping to that binary question.
That fact that someone even brought that up.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of, now that I'm thinking about it, is there any sort of similar thing in the law field?
Privileging the hypothesis sort of thing?
Well, I will say that when it comes to, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but part of I like his example in the post about having to figure, like, assigning probabilities to each and every individual thing that happens, and as when you're an attorney and especially when you're reading like in discovery, like a police report, the police have written it down in a certain way, right? But you have to kind of read between the lines and try to find where they may have completely missed what they actually did. You know what I'm saying? So like, because they wrote it in a way that's beneficial to them.
Right.
So like, even though this doesn't really have anything to do directly with the post, that did kind of hit me where it's like, oh yeah, I have to find those probability distributions in a sense all the time, because they'll say that they did this, but I mean realistically most cops don't do that. And also if he did this instead, that would be really bad for him, but he wrote it the way that is really good for him. Well, that's convenient. What if he didn't do it that way? And so you have to try to dig through more evidence to find, whether or not he's actually or she's actually being accurate in the report. Not really related to the post, but that's something that made me think of.
Yeah, that's.
You have to find where the errors could be.
Do a lot of defense lawyers do that, or are you just like really good?
No, you have to do it. I mean,
Oh,
I mean, that's defending someone 101. I mean, the cops are going to write what they did in a report, and they're going to do it. I mean, I think they're mostly pretty honest, but they're going to either make mistakes or do things in a way that is beneficial to them and that is subconsciously what they want to believe they did.
Right.
That is
You leave out the
illegal.
part where you forgot one line of the Miranda rights or something.
Right. And so, like, for example, when you're pulled over for a suspected DUI, you have to be read that you can get a blood test or a breath test. If they flub that line and only offer you one, the results of that entire test, whatever you choose, could be thrown out completely.
Ooh.
And so the case goes away. Right.
Also, is this a great idea to always hit record whenever police approach you for anything?
I don't see why it wouldn't be. I mean, you want to. I mean, most cops today have body cam when they're engaging with a civilian for like any reason, but I mean, there's really no harm in having more recordings. I can only imagine what practicing must have been like before there was video of everything, and you had to just go by the cop's word and you had nothing else. I mean, you could say that they're probably full of shit, but how do you know?
Yeah.
Nowadays we have cameras that sometimes will show you that they are full of shit, or show you that they're at least somewhat wrong in a really relevant way,
or back up their case. Like at the very least, it's like, look, we've all seen the film.
Yeah.
Like the idea of just having actual evidence as opposed to someone telling a convincing story.
There was a literal stabbing in process.
Yeah. There's a couple quick things. One is Mike Birbiglia is a good stand-up comic. He doesn't really tell jokes as much as he tells like 70-minute stories, and it might have been his first Netflix special or his second. The big thing he keeps coming back to is he was in a car accident where he got T-boned at an intersection, and the cop who wrote the report said that car A came through the intersection and was struck from this side by car A. And he was car A who came through the intersection, and car B struck him, but the cop put car A for both. And he just went nuts arguing, calling the cop over like every day for months, trying to get him on the phone. He tried to take it to court, and
Like, it was an obvious typo.
It was.
Error.
And what ended up happening was he finally got the cop on the phone, and he's like, "Look, you said this," and he's like, "Just do the right thing and pay the guy." And he's like, "No, you don't understand. You made a mistake."
Me.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Just do the right thing and pay it up." And so, of course, this drove Mike insane, and he's trying to figure this out. But apparently, it was like ruining his life, and he's just told by his friends, like, "Dude, just drop it. Yes, you were right." But he during the show, he brings the police report, and he blows it up on a big screen behind him, so you can show, and
Dude,
you can feel his passion getting nuts about it.
That is the best revenge. Become successful and like point this shit out.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm sure he made more than the cost of whatever he lost in that case, telling that story on Netflix, right?
I suppose, but it's still infuriating.
Oh yeah,
Just
you
the
can
injustice
tell
of it.
he's past the period where he's obsessed about it, but during the show, you can still tell he's getting impassioned about it. I was thinking of probabilities in court, though. There's like, what do you call this? Flipping the denominator or something? There's a general word for it. So, guy's on trial for killing his wife. The defense says almost no husbands kill their wives. It's got to be 1 in 100,000 or whatever it is, right? And that is not the number you're looking for. The number is, given dead wife, what are the odds that the husband did it?
Right, which is much, much higher.
Right. And so that's where I can kind of see like actual numbers coming in. And then of course there's actual numbers that whatever the numbers are, they're available. And so I could just imagine someone trying that switcheroo and being like, look, almost nobody does this. And it's like, he's not almost nobody. He's the person of interest for a reason.
Well, I did, while we were talking, I just thought of an example of generalizing from fictional evidence in the law, one that I've seen quite a few times. So back when I was a law clerk, that's when I've seen the vast majority of the trials I've seen, because I was working for judges who would have trials every other week. So I've seen like 30 or so trials that happened here in Arapahoe County. And the beauty of that job is I was able to talk to the jurors. before, during, and after trial. Before and during, you kind of stay mum because there's certain things that if you say can cause real problems. But afterwards, there's no rules. You can ask them anything you want about what made them come to their decision. And one thing that often they would say, especially after an acquittal, is that there was the evidence they expected to be there, which I assume I'm guessing is based on CSI.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they wanted more DNA. You know, they wanted something that more directly ties them. Now, I think it has kind of a fortuitous outcome. I mean, if we're going to be, you know, beyond a reasonable doubt, it's a pretty high standard. If you're close, I think that, you know, the tie should go to the runner and they probably shouldn't be convicted. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who expect that level of evidence should be there. And then the state just doesn't have the resources for that level of evidence to be in every single, you know, domestic violence case.
Yeah.
And so it's just not there. And the guy ends up walking because of it.
I have heard, prosecuting attorneys really hate CSI because it makes everyone expect these unreasonable standards, which may not even exist in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's subtle. I don't think most people actually expect that, but I think when they're presented with the case, they finally realize, oh, that's all they have is the testimony of a police officer, maybe one video, couple of things.
Yeah.
I was expecting something more, and I think that probably comes from seeing in fictional situations a very thorough case. The cases that you see on TV would be like the Derek Chauvin trial. It would be the most high profile type stuff. That's when all the effort is put in.
That's when you spend millions of dollars on forensics.
Right.
Yeah. When it's just a dude beating up his wife, it's like, I got 10 more of these to get to tonight. I don't have $1 million for each one.
Right. Exactly.
Man, that sucks. Anyways.
Yeah, happier news.
Yes, the thing I found super interesting about this is this thing that I pulled out. Eliezer says, in the ancestral environment, there were no moving pictures. What you saw with your own eyes was true. It will be hard enough to undo the damage by deliberate concentration. Why invite the vampire into your house? In chess or Go, every wasted move is a loss. In rationality, any non-evidential influence is, on average, entropic. And, like, I really like that because it feels true to me. I guess it's truthy, where when you see something and God, especially like on TV, you see the close-ups of people crying and you get all emotionally invested in it. Like, it feels like you're seeing something that actually happened, which is why we care that, like, no, you can't do that to Scarlet Witch. She's a good person. Stop fucking her. But I was wondering, like, is this a general argument against fiction?
I will just raise the point that Eneasz made a Marvel reference well before it even crossed my mind to do so. I think my obsession is contagious. You mentioned the fact, that he wrote HPMOR. So
yeah, well, that was going to be my next follow up to that.
Oh, I shouldn't have jumped the gun. Sorry.
Yeah, but is it a case against fiction in general that fiction, since it literally is made up and you know it's lies? And it is altering what you see in the world, or it is giving you something to see in the world that you're going to somehow, on some emotion level, internalize. So is it just fucking up your picture of the reality to consume fiction?
I think that's a pretty weak rebuttal against it. You know what I mean? Like, people enjoy fiction so much.
Yeah.
The idea that it's slightly warping your view of reality, it's probably some truth to that. But, like, compared to the beauty that you see in fiction, you know, how much joy you get, I would say that fictional works are one of the things that make life worth living.
Yeah.
You know, and so, like, the fact that it's warping your view of reality, and unless you give me a really clear-cut, very poisonous example, the fact that I suppose it is literally a case against fiction to some extent, but it's just not very convincing in my opinion.
Okay.
I think you're supposed to get lessons in wisdom and fun from fiction, not facts, right? And so that said, lessons can be misapplied to reality or properly applied to reality, right?
Yeah.
1984 was a fiction, and yet the author clearly intended for some aspects of it to be, hey, be mindful of this, right? If Terminator is a great example, right? Terminator is a great fun story. The lesson you shouldn't take from it is that robots will
look like humans and track you down.
They will, like that if you build an artificial intelligence, it will make robots with 2 legs and 2 arms and glowing red eyes and a gun.
Yeah.
That's not the lesson you should take from it. Maybe it could be a general lesson about technological hubris or something, right? Or more than that, it's just fucking fun watching Arnold Schwarzenegger be a Terminator, right?
One of the interesting parts of Terminator is that like the lesson you learn early on is the vast majority of humankind is wiped out when the AI tricks the US and the Soviet Union into exchanging nuclear weapons. But like all you actually see in the movie is one robot tracking one other person because that's the really exciting part. But yeah, the way the AI actually wiped out humanity was, hacking people's beliefs and threat responses.
I just watched last night the episode of Rick and Morty in season 4 that was like 3 minutes of the episode was just snakes hissing. It was like the snake, I forget what episode it was. I think season 4, episode 5.
Yeah.
Um, and they get time travel shenanigans. The snakes do, and so like there's Snake Hitler and there's Snake Abraham Lincoln, and when one guy goes back in time to kill Snake Hitler, this other teleporting snake shows up right behind him from time, shoots him. Then another one teleports in and shoots him, and then from like that side of the building, you start seeing Snake Pile's body up. That's what you would have expected to happen in Terminator if they had a time machine, right?
Right.
You drop a bunch of them, and they do something kind of like that in the one. I don't know. They went off the rails with
Branches
these.
on the Tree of Time?
Well, that one for sure.
Oh, okay.
That's an Alexander Wales short story. Everyone should check out. But in one of the Terminator movies, they actually play with the idea that time did something. Okay. There was the one. Might have been
In the first Terminator, the thing was they built the time machine. The AI built the time machine just as the humans were getting in, and so it only had time to send out one Terminator before the humans smashed it. So
and then threw back their own person.
Well, yeah, before the humans, I guess, grabbed it. Yeah, but. And then as the movies went on, they're just like, oh, actually, I had a time to throw back 2. No, there was time to throw back 3 machines. And yeah.
I mean, if depending on how hard it is to change the time on these things, I would have set the robot to go back 30 minutes and guard the door so that I could bring in more robots to do the actual important mission, right?
Right, maybe.
So,
yeah.
All right. But, it is what it is. It wouldn't have been a fun story if it was just the snake episode of Rick and Morty.
Right, yeah.
Might have been a fun episode if it was Branches of the Tree of Time, but... yeah, see, you told you this takes longer than 20 minutes.
All right, fine.
I had a great time with it, though.
But yeah, so I was wondering, what can we extrapolate from the fact that the person who said this thing, implying that all fiction is a deliberate skewing of your vision of reality, is also the person who wrote Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality?
In rationality, any non-evidential influence is, on average, entropic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if, like, when I draw lessons from Methods of Rationality, I'm not thinking, and here's how I will get good at Quidditch, right? I'm thinking, I'm trying to generalize the lessons of the characters, like their actions, their failures, their successes, that sort of thing, in a way that's not specific on the evidence of the world in particular, but more generalizable. Plus, like when Harry monologues and just talks about science, like he's citing real-world papers, right? I guess if I am going to take the other side of that argument, though, if I'm going to generalize, like if I'm going to try and internalize wisdom from the lessons of the characters or something, I'm doing that in a fictional setting from a fictional universe. Real world lessons probably are way different than how to, if someone's plotting to ruin my life, it probably won't look like Lucius Malfoy doing it, right?
Right.
It'll probably look way different. So maybe I shouldn't generalize too much from that kind of lesson.
My thought upon contemplating this was that Eliezer knows exactly what he's doing, and he's trying to introduce fictional evidence into the minds of everyone who reads this in order to steer the future in a way that is what he considers more less likely to kill all of humanity. And I don't know, that seems almost dark artsy, but also like I like it, and also I love HPMOR, so I'm not about to complain. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to think. And the more I thought about it, like, all of us don't have perfect views of reality anyway, right? We could use some adjusting in some way. So if you consume a piece of fiction that uses fictional evidence to adjust your priors more towards the way the world really is, that's not helpful. It's just really hard to, target stories to people where it would help them as opposed to hurt them necessarily.
Yeah, this reminds me of you mentioned perfect views of reality. There's a Saturday Morning Breakfast cereal comic. Let's see, it would have been, I can't find it right away. Oh, there it is. QASP. Quality as shitty, or qualia are shitty perception.
Okay.
And so, like the perfect view of reality, he's imagining that if we had like a way to get perfect quantum level information about reality, we could call it Excalibur. It's easier to read than it is to say. it made me think of that.
Okay.
Like, all right, yeah, if we could get perfect information on the thing, then there'd be no disagreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to be a bat? Well, that's a stupid question because bats have shitty perception. It's if they had perfect quality perception, then this wouldn't be a problem. I kind of forgot the rest of my point because I was thinking of the comics. So,
Yeah.
yep.
I like that use of fiction, and like I said, I just like fiction in general.
Yeah, I don't think the author takes a hard stance against fiction, or he wouldn't have spent 5 years writing Harry Potter fan fiction.
And reading tons of fiction, so yeah.
I think the key, like I said, is just not to run from I saw this in a movie, therefore I should be concerned about it happening in real life, depending on what the movie, on how applicable the movie is, and that's maybe a harder lesson to get, right?
Yeah, I mean, in just the whole idea of be cautious of exposing yourself to fictional evidence, I think is an interesting idea to ponder, and I'm not sure how to incorporate it into my life, considering how much I love fiction.
I don't know what it would mean, like if you're watching a slasher fic with a home invasion, you might learn some general lessons about like what not to do because it gets every family in every movie like that killed, right? That said, you're assuming that the people who are going to break into your house are going to be like the people in the movie, right? Really, the solution is to go upstairs, grab your shotgun, and just sit with your back facing the door, or excuse me, sit with your back against the wall and face the door.
Yeah.
I mean, that might happen in a horror movie. I don't know. I think just go forth, have fun, and don't grab a specific conclusion from fiction and say we should be worried about exactly this, unless you can make a good independent case why, right? Again, if you're worried about 1984 state-like government stuff, you can point to, well, look, what you probably shouldn't do is say, well, look, these three things happened, and then it became like, this dystopia from 1984. But you can say these people weren't very happy. The author was a pretty savvy guy. People aren't happy now, and we're kind of checking these boxes, right? Because it seems more applicable to human psychology. It's kind of like generalizing from actual history.
That's what he goes on to say in the rest of the post, that people don't actually treat this like as a prophecy or as real evidence, but emotionally it feels like, this is something that happened in the past, or this happened over in a different country, so how are we going to address it? He says that journalists don't believe the future will contain Borg. They don't believe Star Trek is a prophecy. But when someone talks about brain-computer interfaces, they think, will the future contain Borg? Not, how do I know computer-assisted telepathy makes people less nice? Which, the second question is, the real question, but you go with the emotional affect of like, oh, hey, what if there's Borg in the future? That's what happened when this happened in Star Trek.
So what are Borg?
Oh my god. Wow.
Yeah, you're right. This is your bi-monthly reminder that I haven't seen Star Trek.
Wow, we need a not everything is a Star Trek episode.
But they're like a collective intelligence mind, and there's like these individual mindless drones who just like steal technology and have no care for lives. So whatever they destroy, it's like it doesn't matter to them at all.
They're like a hive mind species, and yeah, the individuals, they're drones. They don't matter.
Kind of like a less coordinated buggers from Ender's Game.
Yes.
Okay, I can follow that. Yeah, so you don't want that. But you're right. So I think that you can watch that and say this might be an actual downside of doing human mind interface telepathy or something, right?
But the better question is...
But you focus on the actual thing, not Borgs.
Yeah.
Or Borg, if it's not plural. It doesn't look like it's plural.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. So that was that post. It was a very interesting one. And the next one is another classic of the sequences, hold off on proposing solutions. And this, anyone who's read H.P. Moore will be familiar with this one. But the gist of it is that when a group faces a problem, the natural tendency of its members is to propose possible solutions as they begin to discuss the problem. And consequently, the group interaction focuses on the merits and problems of those proposed solutions. When a researcher enacted an edict to enhance group problem solving, the edict was, do not propose solutions until the problem has been discussed as thoroughly as possible without suggesting any, and this did very well.
I do try to keep this in mind, and this one's not that hard to do, especially when working in groups. If you're trying to figure something out or work on a solution to a problem, especially if you remember to bring it up early, depending on if you're dealing with people who have heard the phrase or not, it is very helpful to say, hold on, before we start trying to answer the question, let's discuss the problem a little more. And I find that very helpful to do with work things, with non-work things, with whatever. But anyone who's read, like you said, Method of Rationality, particularly Chapter 25, named, you guessed it, Hold Off on Proposing Solutions, is already familiar with the lesson of this one.
I hate to put you on the spot again, but I don't really hate that because that's why I brought you here.
Fair enough.
Is there... I'm assuming that in trials there's a lot of not proposing solutions and trying to map out the problem space first, but maybe I'm wrong about this.
Well, I mean, you should, by the time you're at trial, all of the issues should have been meted out by then. I'm not sure what you mean. Usually, I mean, trials, they have their fair share of things that come up that fuck things up. But for the most part, whatever the main issues are already handled before trial.
Oh,
right? You should
okay.
already
you're
have
just
that
trying
way out of the way by then.
So you're just trying to convince the jury of
Yeah, you
what-
have your story and I have mine, and we're going to tell our stories and see whether or not the jury thinks you're guilty of what they're charged with beyond a reasonable doubt. But like, as far as like an evidentiary issue, like whether something should be allowed to come in, that's already handled by this time.
So I guess it's all the pre-trial work where you're
right.
Okay.
Yeah, there's usually those several stages before a trial starts where you would handle those issues ahead of time, and mostly because if you handle them during trial, what that actually looks like is the jury just sitting around doing nothing for long periods of time, or being told to just sit in their jury room, which is this tight little room that no one wants to be in for more than 5 minutes, and just having them sit in there for 2 hours. And then, you have to check in on them every so often, be like, sorry guys, just going to be another 30 minutes. And they're like, sure. You know what I mean? It just annoys people, slows everything down. So yeah, you always get that stuff done well ahead of time.
How much pretrial work is there per trial? I guess
Well,
it depends on the case.
Yeah, it depends on the case. I mean, there's some cases where it's just pretty clear that there's going to be a plea agreement pretty early on, and so you're just doing some very basic, like you'll review the discovery, you'll reach out to the prosecution, talk to them a little bit, you'll ask for your client to provide some mitigation, like let's make them see you as more than just the crime that you're charged with, so that you get a better deal. But then there's some stuff where, okay, well, there was this there's this huge, like maybe one event that occurred. There was, like, I'm thinking of one in particular, a client I had who, there was several witnesses to the crime. They gave some statements on the scene to the police officers, but it was very bare bones. And this was a case we thought might go to trial. So we actually hired a private investigator to go out and interview those witnesses further. And you want to get those also like videotaped. So you can also maybe have them transcribed. If you ever call them and they go on the stand and they're going off track from what they said, you can impeach them with that. You can say, well, isn't it true that on this date you had an interview with so-and-so? And isn't it true that, you said this on that date?
So impeaching is like the technical term for dunking on someone?
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's
Dunking
impeachment. Impeachment is legally making someone look like a liar.
Okay.
That's what impeachment evidence basically is. Is trying to make you look like a bad witness.
Ain't you full of shit?
Yeah.
It's what I've learned, because Justin and I've had several talks on like how law works, and it is so disappointingly even more convoluted than I would have guessed. So like what you'd like to imagine, and ideally you would start with not even really a defense and prosecution. You would start with like an objective, like, what happened here, right? And then the cynic might think, oh no, what you've got is the defense who starts with the default assumption, they didn't do it, let's try and prove it, and the prosecution who says they did it, let's prove it. It's not even like that, right? It's so much more, there's so many more twists and turns in there, where it's like the defense is like, oh, he totally did it, but did he do the exact charge that they brought to bear? No, can we mitigate that? It's just makes me glad I will probably never end up in a courtroom, because I don't break that many laws.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
I don't want to represent your ass.
I would have.
Wouldn't it be unethical for you to represent him? Oh no. Oh okay.
I don't think I'd have the patience for it.
No.
I'd be
Do
like,
you just go on a murder spree in the middle of the courtroom?
Or I'd be like, look, I'll say whatever you want. Can I just how long do I have to serve in jail to get out of this courtroom?
Yeah.
5 years? Fine.
Oh my god.
I'm kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely not being your attorney if you're gonna say something like that.
Well, you are on record as pre-caving to torture, so
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, if anyone needs a reminder, if you're gonna torture me, I will just bet I'll break right away. You don't even have to start breaking my fingers.
Yeah, but that just makes it really easy for someone to say, "Hey, I'm going to torture you if you don't give me $5."
By all means. I mean, it has to be a plausible threat of torture.
Okay.
Yeah.
They actually got to be holding a hammer and.
Yeah, if someone asked me for $5 and they had a hammer,
I'd probably say yes to that too.
I'd, like, here's 10.
Yeah, yeah. Here's a tip.
One per finger. Cool. So in the post, he gives an example problem with employees rotating around to not get bored in their jobs, but that reduces efficiency. And then some groups were given the edict of don't propose any solutions until you've discussed the problem as much detail as possible, and some aren't. And the response or results here was that those who were not given the edict immediately,
Those not given the edict immediately begin, like, they hear the problem and then start with solutions as their first, like, vocalizations on the subject, and then argue about the solutions.
yes,
If they're told, hold off on proposing solutions, they discuss the problem more,
yeah,
and then they actually arrive at what in this situation turns out to be the ideal solution of rotating the senior member around or something.
rotating the top two and letting
Yeah.
the worst one stay. But
You know what's fun is I remember hearing this example in school.
oh really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's been so long I can't remember. Must have been brought up in this context, but it makes me think how many things I've read from the sequences that I remember in school. I must have had a pretty good psych education.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, you did go into the psych college course.
I
so
guess. What's funny is like in high school,
maybe
I
they
took
primed you in high school.
I took psychology in high school, and then I took AP psychology in high school, which is what, like 90 minutes a day, 3 days a week or something.
Okay.
Or maybe an hour a day, 5 days a week, whatever the schedule was. Point is, it was like about the amount of contact hours you get for half of an undergraduate degree.
Okay.
Because you're there for 70 minutes twice a week or some bullshit for a 2-credit class or 3-credit. I forget what the numbers are, but it's the amount of contact I got in high school was on par with what I got in college when it came to the actual subjects I wanted to take.
Nice. Yeah, it was pointed out that those that were given the edict immediately begin to argue about the importance of productivity versus worker autonomy and avoidance of boredom. But those who are told not to discuss solutions at all were much more likely to arrive at the solution of just rotating the two more capable workers.
I wonder if this replicates. I'm assuming it does because this doesn't ding at all on my bullshit-o-meter. But that said, this would be easy enough for more people to go back and test. So if it did hit that replication crisis business, someone by now could have done it again, or under various guises with different questions.
There is the claim made that when groups are faced with very tough problems, that's when group members are most apt to propose solutions immediately, which, was kind of shocking to me. Is that the case?
I don't know where he got that. What he points out then is, like, if the problem is how do we keep humanity from being extinct in 500 years, people have an answer like that, right?
Solve global warming?
Or, build
Kill the
AGI.
billionaires?
Yeah, build AGI, don't build robots. Whatever it is, somebody's got an answer for that, right?
Okay.
When in fact the problem is really hard.
Yeah.
And people, if you have an answer to that ready and you haven't spent a long time thinking about it, you should probably reconsider that answer, right?
Yeah. He goes on to say that the effectiveness of our decisions is determined only by whatever evidence and processing we did in first arriving at our decisions. After you write the bottom line, it is too late to write more reasons above. And this is a great time to plug the previous LessWrong post. What was it called? The Bottom Line, right? Was the name of it? Yeah, which made this point in far more detail. If you make your decision very early on, it will, in fact, be based on very little thought.
Yeah.
And since we change our minds less often than we think, which again, note back to that LessWrong post, once you can guess what your answer will be, you have probably already decided. And if you can guess your answer half a second after hearing the question, then you have about half a second in which to be intelligent, which is not great. Did you want to jump in with anything?
I think I'm good.
Okay, just making sure, because didn't want to leave you out.
I want to grab the last bullet point because I've got a good example of this.
Okay.
Traditional rationality emphasizes falsification, the ability to relinquish an initial opinion when confronted by clear evidence against it. And I like this just meta note. He talks about traditional rationality as basically like Popperian science, which I think has tons of value, but he brings it down because it's a great bar and it's very valuable. But he's like, we can do better if we try harder.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of modern rationality, as you'd call it.
Yeah.
Once an idea gets into your head, it will probably require way too much evidence to get it out again. Worse, we don't always have the luxury of overwhelming evidence. I suspect that a more powerful and more difficult method is to hold off on thinking of an answer, to suspend, draw out, that tiny moment when we can't yet guess what our answer will be, thus giving our intelligence a longer time in which to act. Even half a minute would be an improvement over half a second.
Right.
That makes me think of Darwin's On the Origin of Species, or in just evolution altogether. That is a very unintuitive and confusing conclusion to come to. So it's unlikely that he started with the idea, you know what, I bet we're literally cousins with bananas, and then went out to go prove that, right? It's the kind of thing when you're, and maybe I just, I got the 5-minute overview in school, I'm sure, but my real introduction to it that I I'm sure most of my references go to in my brain without knowing it, is Richard Dawkins' The Greatest Show on Earth. And he spends like the first 5 chapters just daisy chain walking you to the basics of evolution. He does not
Nice.
start from the begin, from the conclusion and give you all the evidence for it. He walks you from wherever your starting point is. You get to fully understand it by halfway through the book, or most of the way through the book anyway. It's when it's presented that way in the very incremental step, you can sit in that moment of uncertainty for a long time. And I imagine that's how it was initially discovered, right? I think most confusing things I think most big problems are probably solved that way, where there was a long period where people not really know what's going on. They just go out and measure stuff. And like then they're thinking, okay, well, hold on, if this flower is so deep and I'm only seeing these kinds of butterflies or these kinds of birds, like there's got to be a bird with a beak deep enough to get into that flower, right? Like, because that's how the rest of these are getting pollinated. You're out there seeing these things and trying to solve to get an explanation for it. The eventual conclusion is, again, like that's my favorite fact. Like it's fun and cosmological to think about that your body is made of stardust. Like that's awesome. But to me, my one sentence zinger for like mind blowingness is like, we are literally cousins with bananas. Like that is so. I don't. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just it's fun.
It reminds me. Did you see that terrible Alien prequel, Prometheus?
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
It was so bad, but at the very beginning, like this very humanoid-looking dude, just like a really tall, bald dude, I think they're like 10 feet tall or something, comes to Earth, puts some black goo in water, and eventually that is like what helps make the humans, right?
If you say so. I forgot the movie made
Yeah,
no
I haven't
sense
seen
to
it
me.
since it came out. So,
But yeah, that was the thing. That was like, this will help seed the intelligence into this planet, and this was done as life is first evolving on Earth, maybe even before that. Like we see barren rocks at the beginning of the movie, and it was pointed out that like after the millions of years have passed, where we get from that little black goo to humans, like we're more closely related to strawberries than we are to the aliens that first seeded the planet, and yet somehow we look exactly like them, except a few feet shorter.
Right. Yeah. It seems to strain credulity that.
It's basically just people not knowing how evolution works.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite example of that is X-Men.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it opens up with Sir Patrick Stewart talking about evolution, one small genetic mutation. And it's
And
like
suddenly you can throw lightning bolts.
right, or teleport, or
Yeah.
control minds, or move metal. This gene flipped, and now suddenly I can move metal with my mind. Yeah, I mean it's all fun and good though.
I do think this ties a bit into the fictional evidence post, though, because when he says the ability to relinquish an initial opinion when confronted by clear evidence against it is what traditional reality is based on, traditional rationality. But once you have an idea in your head, it'll probably require way too much evidence to get it out again. Like, seems sort of like a argument for not getting unreality-founded evidences into your head.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how wedded am I to any belief I got from watching a movie. I'm trying to think of any movies I've seen recently that weren't, I just saw a movie like in the last couple of days. What did I watch? Oh, I watched a movie last night. It was a not Polish. It was a Danish movie with Mads Mikkelsen. It was like
Could have been better if it was a Polish movie.
the reason I thought it was Polish because I watched a trailer for a Polish Netflix series. I think I forget. It might be like the word orgasm came up a lot in the trailer.
Okay.
These high school or college girls make an orgasm app or something, and I was like, this isn't Polish. Eneasz could watch it and understand it.
It'd be hard. My Polish is bad.
There's subtitles. You could relearn Polish watching
Perfect.
this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this might be good, but I'm not going to pilot a show, that I have to watch it read subtitles. Anyway, this Danish movie was subtitled, and it was like an action comedy because the humor there was very different. Point is, I saw a movie last night, and I'm not taking any lessons from that movie.
Okay.
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It was
And yet now you hate Danish people just a little bit more than yesterday.
What does that mean with people not liking Danish people?
Oh, I don't know. Is that a thing?
Like, it seems to be a joke.
I wasn't sure whether I should go with love or hate Danish people more, and I was like, hate's more, incendiary. I'll go with that one.
There was a joke on a TV show called Better Off Ted where she played the sister on Arrested Development. I forget her name. She played like this CEO.
Portia something?
Yeah, Portia something.
Okay.
Anyway, and I forget what it was. Oh, and there was also like a picture I saw on Reddit of like someone's lawn sign. It's like, we love we love Muslims, Jews, Christians, various nationalities, various races, except Danes. Fuck Danes. And like it was clearly a joke.
Right.
But then Veronica on Better Off Ted makes a similar joke, and he's like, "Is that why you hate Danish people? I don't hate Danish people. I love them. That's why I hold them to a higher standard."
Nice.
So there must be some background meme to this. I'll have to look into it. Why do people hate the Danes?
I know that the U.S. and the Netherlands, I believe, is where the Danish are located, have a special friendship treaty that makes it much easier for Americans to go and become Danish residents permanently.
Cool.
So, yeah, I guess we hate them so much that we made a special friendship treaty with them just to keep them in check, keep your friends closer.
They make delicious
Or no, keep
pastries
your enemies closer.
called Danish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
I went to Whole Foods last night to buy some.
We've gotten off topic as we always do. We should get back onto the
I
topic
knew
of
it.
murder.
All right. Well, before that, we've got a quick, speaking of murder, muggings. For
Oh,
next
yes.
time, we've got Pascal's mugging, tiny probabilities of vast utilities, and illusion of transparency, why no one understands you.
Again, two classics from the LessWrong genre.